Okay, so I propose to start now. So good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for attending this webinar on strategic importance of biomanufacturing and new space opportunities, which is a very exciting topic. So can you confirm that you hear me well? Someone in the chat, is it okay for everyone? Fine. So my name is Marie-Laure Gouzy, and I am a project manager at MEDES. And today we are going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is how to bridge biomanufacturing to space. And today, to start this webinar, we are very pleased to welcome some very relevant speakers. We will be presented in more details as the webinar progresses. Just to say that first we will hear from Mr. Dequier, Mrs. Lisa Denzer from European Space Agency and Mrs. Audrey Berthier, which is the Executive Director from MEDES. And after these keynotes, I will be happy to leave the floor to Cynthia Bouteau, which is President of Space Commerce Matters. Space Commerce Matters is an innovative company dedicated to the commercialization of the low Earth orbit, and I think you can trust her to explain what does it mean, in fact. And finally, we will end this webinar with a panel discussion, which will be moderated by Cynthia, and for which we are very pleased to welcome Chloe Evans, which is Head of International Business for France Biotech, Richard Bolling from TechShot, and Jordan Greco from Lambda Vision. Thank you very much for attending this webinar and to give us your feedback. And I'm pretty sure that people are waiting for your testimony and who wants to really know how to do science in space, especially when you come from another sector. So today we will have 90 minutes together. We will start with, as I said, with the 3 keynotes. This will be illustrated by the concrete topics, and finally the panel discussion will be the opportunity to answer all your questions from attendants. So don't hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. And just a last word before leaving the floor to our first speaker. The webinar will be recorded, so I think we will be able to share the video after the webinar. So I think now it's time for the webinar to start.
Yes, so we're delighted today.
So it's...
Sorry, go ahead, Emmanuel.
No,
I just wanted
go
to.
ahead. Sorry.
No, sorry. So we're really happy to have today Monsieur Emmanuel Dequier, who is the director of the French Grand Défi Programme in Biomanufacturing for the SGPI, which is the Secrétariat Général pour l'Investissement. Emmanuel, the floor is yours.
Okay, Chloe, thanks a lot for this introduction, and thanks a lot for the invitation to the webinar, which aims to make bridge between domains which are not related at the first thing, space and bioproduction of biotherapies, natural, to give you a French on this topic. First, next slide, please. Just we can start. Okay, so today, healthcare and health technologies are priorities for the French government. And these priorities were the subject of major announcement done by the French President Macron in June 2021. The subject of these announcements was the French Health Innovation Strategy 2030. This is a 9-year plan with a 3 million euros fund, which will boost the development of the healthcare sector by supporting the whole value chain from the academic research up to the industrialization of biotherapies, the production, and the market access. So in a few words, €1 billion will be dedicated to reinforce French biomedical research by funding new ambitious research programs and to develop incentives to attract and keep in France talented researchers. Fund will also use to set up training urgently needed in the field of biomanufacturing. Second point, the French government decided also to choose 3 fields to concentrate its efforts to accelerate innovation in this field. It's concerning first the biotherapy and production of therapy, second, digital health technologies, third, to prepare us for pandemics and cyber risks. The Accelerator Strategy 2030 will also support industrialization of health products in France, new industrial investments, and by accelerating and facilitating the market access of new useful biotherapies. Another point of the plan will lead to the construction of the French agency dedicated to healthcare innovation and to lead all these programs. So next slide, please.
Mr. Dequier, do you think we can hear you?
Yes, thanks.
I think the bandwidth is a bit low. Could you try and deactivate your camera just to see if it works better in terms of sound?
Yeah, okay.
Sorry.
So I hope that will not shut down the communication.
Okay.
Okay. So can you hear me? That's better?
That's much better. Thank you very much.
Okay, cool. Okay, cool. So now I will focus on one of the strategic acceleration embedded in strategic acceleration. And the strategic acceleration will be dedicated to biotherapies and their bioproduction. This is a €800 million funded one. So this is very important to be a major actor in this field because first, this is 10% market annual growth. That companies could benefit of this growth. So, second point, today France is 95% dependent on import of biotherapies. So it's essential to develop this industry in France to be less dependent from other countries and to have an industrial environment which allows France to conduct its own health politics. And this is also essential to drive effort to maintain or lower the cost of biotherapies. In our public-funded healthcare system, this objective is essential to be able in the future to share this medical innovation with all. Due to the increase of the cost of those therapies. For example, one cancer therapy costs around €300. So that's there is some way to lower the cost that we should find. So the strategic acceleration program will first foster innovation through call for projects, and it will facilitate patient and market access to accelerate the development of new biotherapies. It will foster public and private partnerships. It will help developing high-performance industrial tools, and like that, to participate to the sovereignty of the product of the French bioproduction. So next slide, please. Yeah. The overall aim of the strategic acceleration is to make France the first European country for new biotherapies development and biomanufacturing. The target of the strategic acceleration by 2025 are to double the number in this sector, reaching 20,000 employees. Today, there are 10,000 employees working in this sector. To produce at least in France, and to have an chance the emergence of one unicorn, 5 mid-sized companies, and 5 high potential companies by 2025. Next slide, please. Yeah. So if you can change the slide, so I can move to the. Okay, I don't know. It's the video is with. Okay, it's on. Thanks. So. The French effort on this field on the field of biomanufacturing didn't start just now, but it started before this announcement with a program called Grand Défi, program which I'm in charge. Grand Défi or Great Challenges in Biotherapy. This is a 30 million euros program started in December 2019. It has been constructed with actors of the field through an important number of interviews. And the objectives of the program are one, to participate of the development of CDMO, so that's a company that's produced biotherapy, by developing the French ecosystem, and also to develop innovation which will participate to increase the production yields and to mastering cost to make biopharmaceutics production sustainable for health insurance. This program works on two pillars. So on the next slide, the first pillar aims to develop a strong ecosystem by developing a network of public core facilities specialized in biomanufacturing of biotherapies. These core facilities will accelerate the development of innovations coming from public or private actors. The second point of this pillar is to set up a French bioproduction alliance regrouping all stakeholders of the field, big pharma, biotech companies, but also technological or IT companies, tools provider, French research organization, and other public or private non-profit organizations involved in this industry. The second pillar on the next slide aims to foster innovation to help industry to reach its target in yield production and to accelerate development of new French technologies. This work through a call for projects on three axes. The first is on developing new cell lines or media that feed our bioreactors. The second is to develop new tools for online controls of the production to have more accurate control of the line of production. And the third axe is on developing new equipment to make biomanufacturing plants more modular. So the last slide, please. So today, this program helps to build 6 core facilities, which are centers of expertise in bioproduction for proteins, monoclonal antibodies, gene therapies, and cellular therapies. This is also the foreshadowing of the French Bioproduction Alliance, and the Grand Défi finance more than 15 public-private research programs to accelerate the development of new technologies. As example, I can mention development of microalgae, development of new online optical systems, new media development to grow cells, new type of bioreactor or technology using sound waves to improve transduction and transfection in gene therapies. So, in conclusion, biotherapies and bioproduction is now one of the priorities of France. And in a 3 billion euro plan, a dedicated 800 million euros program called Strategic Acceleration will target the biotherapies and biomanufacturing sectors through call for projects to foster innovation or through administrative process to simplify or to facilitate and accelerate market access of these therapies. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I will be pleased to answer your question.
Thank you very much. I don't know if we still, if we already have question or if question will arrive at the end of the webinar. In any case, thank you very much for your very interesting presentation, and I hope we will be able to share the slides because we missed
You're welcome.
some point at the very beginning of the presentation. So thank you very much. Waiting for some questions. I am going to leave the floor to Lisa Denzer, which is here from European Space Agency, and which is innovation officer in the commercialization and innovation team. So Lisa, please, the floor is yours.
Yes, thanks a lot. Hi, everyone. Yes, my name is Lisa Denzer. I've worked in ESA now for 3 years. I'm an innovation officer, and I'm here to connect a little bit what was already said to the opportunities that we have in space. So how can biomanufacturing be carried out in low Earth orbit and beyond, and what are the innovation opportunities here? To give a quick overview, ESA is Europe's gateway to space. We're 22 member states. We have almost 5,000 employees, which are spread across 7 sites in Europe. We also have a spaceport in French Guiana, where we actually launch rockets carrying satellites. We spend around 5.72 billion euro, which translates into only 12 euro per European per year. So everything that is done in ESA, from satellite communications to navigation, Earth observation, exploration, all of that is covered in here. So I think we're delivering quite a good package for the value, and we're focused only on peaceful exploration. I work in human and robotic exploration, and that means we're going to Mars, we're going to the moon, we're building habitats, we're looking at space resources. We're part of developing the Lunar Gateway, where we work together with NASA in an international environment to deliver essential hardware to make this new space station around the moon happen, where there will be science conducted. And most importantly, and I think this is what's really relevant for the audience and for biomanufacturing, what's also really accessible already today is the International Space Station. We have the European Columbus module orbiting Earth around 408 kilometers altitude. And this is a really unique research laboratory where you can do groundbreaking research. In the past decade, ESA alone has already conducted over 1,694 experiments, with the number steadily growing every single day. The unique factor that you have in space and the International Space Station is microgravity. Due to the low gravity, or almost not lacking levels of gravity that you experience there, you really see a completely different set of physical, chemical, and biological processes, which are very much altered. That means you don't really experience things like combustion or convection or phase separation, sedimentation. All of this obviously doesn't happen when you are in space, and that really provides you with an opportunity to look at what you are nominally doing in your processes in a completely different and new way. So this is really what we consider as the driver for innovation, especially also in biomanufacturing. We believe, based on these almost 2,000 experiments we've already done and all the knowledge we gathered, that this really provides also industry with an opportunity to improve products, to improve processes. We think that it can help increase competitiveness in Europe, to improve customer satisfaction, because you may be able to sell better products, to deliver more value, and to improve revenue. We also think that you can use it to develop entirely new products that haven't even been there today, that wouldn't be possible to conceptualize or produce on Earth due to the lack of gravity. And here we see an opportunity for European industry to really increase market share globally, also to target new customer segments. So this is really a business opportunity that is, at the moment, really underrated, I think. And there's also the opportunity to develop new space-based services, although I think that for today, maybe that's not the main focus. The vision and mission of my department, where we work, is to make all of what you've seen before accessible. So we're working very hard to make all of this, to open all of this up, to give industry the opportunity to use all of these facilities with as little with bothering you as little as possible, making complex processes easy and really competitive also on a time scale, because it used to take 10 years to go to space. Now you can do it in half a year or a year. So you can really do it within your product development life cycle, and we're not keeping you from reaching your goals. We're actually accelerating your project. So we want to take you to space. We want to help you strengthen your position in industry, globally, increase competitiveness. Of course, we also want to maximize the value this delivers to society on Earth, in Europe, which is at the heart of what the European Space Agency does. And the Bsgn, the Business and Space Growth Network that I'm developing, is really trying to provide adequate tools and support frameworks to make all of this happen. We have now already seen the infrastructure and technology we have in ESA, the International Space Station, the Gateway. There's other things we're planning. You have microgravity conditions. You also have extreme environments. In space, it can be very cold and seconds after very hot, depending if you're in shadow of the sun or not. You have space resources you can use, and you have human presence, which means you can troubleshoot, which is something that you wouldn't have otherwise if you weren't on the International Space Station. And this really allows you to do commercial research, product development, to test something, to qualify it, but also to produce things on orbit, which I think is an incredibly innovative thing to be done. And this is interesting for most terrestrial industries as well. And I think especially for life sciences, there's great value. And we see ourselves in the middle, bringing this really together and helping you to profit from these commercial services that we provide in space. Existing services that you can already call today, contract tomorrow, and fly the day after almost. I will touch upon them very briefly. There's the IceCube service. They provide 1 U units. That means they are 10 times 10 times 10 centimeters. You can see them here on this image, 3 of them hooked up to the facility in space. It means they are exposed to microgravity, and the price here starts at 50,000 euro. I think for education, there's even less money involved, and you can customize the insert, so you can put in there liquid cells, different setups for your experiment, and the lead time is rather short, so you can do it within half a year if you're well prepared and the complexity is not too high. So it's really something you can start doing tomorrow. Inside IceCubes, there's the Curara protein crystallization facility. As the name suggests, this is used to do protein crystallization, which is of course, very interesting in biomanufacturing, also when you look at drug delivery, drug design mechanisms. And we actually have an interesting project that was conducted just about a year ago. It launched in December with SpaceX to the station about COVID-19, and they essentially used the protein crystallization facility to study formation properties of the remdesivir drug, which is used to treat COVID-19. And they are still working on evaluating the results, but from what we've heard now, it was very interesting for them to do this, and there's more similar projects in the pipeline. Another service that is already available is called Biaret Express service. This is really, I think, the go-to solution for life science experiments. It's a bioreactor in space. That means what you see here on the picture, you have up to 24 different inserts, 8 of which can go into a centrifuge in the middle. That means you can also demonstrate different levels of gravity, so you can really compare what are my cells doing in microgravity versus on Earth gravity, 1G conditions. And that's really interesting because, for example, microgravity, you will observe that cells actually grow faster, so you can do accelerated disease modeling and all sorts of different things that I think Cindy will explain in more detail later. And you have thermal control, which means you can also have different experiment protocols running here that allow you to control the temperature inside the incubator. You can also upload, that's what we call when you launch something to space, and download, bringing it back to Earth. Your samples frozen so that you really get a spot on incubation of your life science, of your cells, for example, in space. So there's the whole end-to-end service package that these companies already deliver. And they can already be contacted today. We also have here a recent project we've signed that's going to study nanomedicine and immunotherapy. Very interesting. They use hybrid magnetic polymeric nanoparticles, and they want to see how the uptake on T cells is taking place in space, with the hope that they can use the insights to improve their delivery mechanism or technology that they want to develop. So this is also industry-led, and it's implemented on Biaret Express. And here, this is also an interesting experiment that was also done around 1 year ago, which is a follow-up of several research experiments we've already done in the past. Biomining, I think this is related to biomanufacturing, albeit here in this case with a little bit of a different angle to it. They were looking at how rock interacts with liquid and how the microbes actually attach to surfaces or biofilms, and what the interaction looks like, to see how the microbes could process the rock for the extraction of, for example, rare materials or earth. So this is also a very interesting approach for manufacturing and mining in space. And you can see here on the right side what these containers look like in cubic. So you have these little bioreactors, experiment units, and the chambers and sample holders, and where you can essentially fill with your customized solution that you require for your experiment. Last but not least, there's also the Bartolomeo service, which is really outside our module. That means you get 100% space. It really is exposed to anything, cosmic radiation, extreme heat, extreme cold. You get the full package. So if you want to test something in really harsh conditions, I would really recommend to use this. And it's a modular approach. You can also host very large experiments here over a very long time. So there's a little bit, has a little bit more, it's a bit broader than the other services we've seen before. And upcoming is Space Rider, which is our space taxi. So this doesn't go to the International Space Station, but it's basically launching on Earth, staying in space, and then returns again a couple of days, weeks later. So it's also bringing back your samples, and they are also providing the opportunity to take experiments and research projects, manufacturing projects to the space environment. So Business and Space Growth Network, we made all of this possible. We're working on making all of this accessible, making it cheap, making it fast. We also help with technical feasibility, business feasibility. We help finding investors, providing co-funding. We take part in risk sharing. We provide the community. We're a growing community, a growing network of experts from different fields. And of course, we provide the space access through our commercial partners, who are then your main contact point. And we have two things, two access points we've just set up, two launch pads. One is the industry accelerators. We're just very excited to be launching one in life sciences with MEDIS and France Biotech. We're here today. And we also have an announcement of opportunity plan, which is called CASE, where it's going to be possible to have a co-funded technical and business feasibility study. So if you have something that is really commercial, where you really see already an end user, maybe you have someone involved already as a customer in your project, you can apply here to get additional funding. The Life Sciences Accelerator, and we're really very excited about this. We have MEDIS as our industrial partner. There's, as I mentioned, France Biotech, Connect by CNES, and BBO Consulting are our partners here. And this is really about curating a project portfolio. So you will be able to apply if you have a project idea. You will be part of the accelerator. You will benefit from the expertise. You will be able to participate to coaching, attend a boot camp. So it's really going to help you take your idea, take your research, your biomanufacturing projects to space. We are setting up a program fund. So if there's anyone in the audience who would like to invest, that's also possible. And then we're really looking forward to accelerate research and product development in this area using the facilities that you've seen before. I've given a lot of information, so in case you feel a little bit lost now, it's completely understandable. We have a website, bsgn.esa.int, where you can go, where you can look about what are the use cases, how does this relate to my industry. You can check the launch pads again, and you can use our Find Partners database, where you can also filter and have a look again at all of these services I've mentioned before. We're also looking here for science partners, so you may also want to join our database to be featured. That's also possible, so please have a look at our website. That's our network. It's non-exhaustive, and it's growing, and these are willing to help, and there's also still room for entities to join. So we look forward to go to space together, and I'm excited to have any questions. Be contacted. You can reach out bsgn@esa.int, and you can also go to our website. We're also on LinkedIn, Business and Space Growth Network, on Twitter @ESA-BSGN, and we have a YouTube playlist where we put together different experiments and explain how things work. Over and out.
Thank you so much, Lisa, for your presentation. Very dense, very complete. Thank you. Just one question for you in the chat, but I think you gave us some element of answer. What will be the strategy for supporting orbital biological research when the ISS is decommissioned?
Well, for now, we don't have a date when the ISS is going to be decommissioned. So, I mean, the agreements are in the process of being extended. I don't see this happening before 2030. We're working very hard on identifying post-ISS scenarios. That includes commercial space stations, it includes commercial modules, it includes international partnerships, it includes free flyers like Space Rider. What I've shown before is going to extend that time. So, for example, we foresee that something like the Biaret Express could also be hosted in Space Rider. So there's definitely opportunities also after the end of the lifetime of the ISS when it then comes. And there's the Lunar Gateway. So perhaps in the future, we will be able to do science commercially also on the gateway. Perhaps we will have something that is commercially accessible even on the lunar surface, on the surface of the moon. So I think there's perhaps even going to be more exciting things than the ISS in the 30s. But this is a bit dreaming.
That's okay. We will be able to launch any experiments in space even after ISS will be decommissioned. So yes, that's right. Yes. I have another question, but I think I'm going to keep it for the rest of the webinar, because it's more about what type of microorganism and so on we can send in the lab. So I think
I can quickly respond from a safety perspective. So technically you can bring anything to the station as long as you make sure that it is contained well. So there is a safety review and they will ask you for different levels of protection. So you need to make sure if you transport fractions of a virus, for example, some DNA or something, that you really make sure that it is contained. So there is levels of containment and it cannot erode or be set free in case of an accident. So that's the main thing you need to take into account. If you have it designed well and if it passes the safety review, then it can be taken to space. So this is a bit up to how you design the experiment unit.
Okay, thank you. But I think we will be able to answer this kind of question after at the question and answer session. Thank you so much again, Lisa.
Okay, thank you. Have fun.
Now, last but not least, Audrey Berthier, which is Executive Director from MEDES. Audrey.
Hello, everybody. Thanks, Lisa and Emmanuel, for this very interesting presentation. I will just give you an overview of who we are, what is MEDES, and of this specific project, the Bsgn Accelerator for the Life Sciences. So MEDES is a French Institute for Space Physiology and Medicine. We are a hybrid entity between space and health. We were created more than 30 years ago by the French Space Agency, CNES, and the Toulouse University hospitals, really with this idea to create an organization combining space and medical expertise. We are mainly located in Toulouse, in the south of France, and our main center is actually what we call the Space Clinic, MEDES Space Clinic, which is completely integrated within the hospital. Legally speaking, we are an economic group of interest, but just to say that we are a private organization, but with public members, and our main members, again, are the French Space Agency, CNES, and Toulouse University hospitals. But we also have other members, mainly French universities and another hospital. We have three main types of activities. The first one is really related to the weightlessness environment and human spaceflight. We provide expertise and operational support in the field of space physiology and medicine for space agencies, of course, mainly for ESA and for CNES, but also for scientists and for companies. In fact, we provide operational support both for the medical follow-up of astronauts during their missions, but we also have a lot of experience to prepare and to perform scientific experiments on the International Space Station in the field of space physiology and medicine. We also do clinical research, both for the space and non-space field. We have this space clinic, a unique infrastructure that we use both for medical, industrial, and space research. And we try to promote application and innovation both for space and health, using space assets to try to accelerate health innovation, including the unique properties of the space environment. We have a team which is really multidisciplinary, combining health professionals and engineers, and of course we work with a large networks of partners at European and international level. As it was mentioned before by Emmanuel and by Lisa, we really think that we are right now at a very exciting stage where there are new opportunities for the field of life sciences. Lisa mentioned that we have an amazing background with a lot of experiments which have been done in the field on ISS at European level, but also with the different international partners, numerous experiments that have demonstrated the unique properties of microgravity and of the space environment to perform research, including in the life sciences. And this with different level of experiments, of course, from the cellular, tissular to the human level. And this is the background, but we are also at a stage where there is a really new development and new opportunities thanks to new space providers, or let's say new offers. The space providers and space companies are completely changing their model, their service offer from a model which was based on equipment providers to service providers, which means that we really have now new opportunities for industrial application, especially in our fields, meaning that these new offers are offering, of course, advanced facilities, but also lowering the cost, reducing the time to fly, and of course they are providing integrated services, managing all the space constraints to enable the research that you imagine to fly in microgravity. And we have also good European space providers in that field. So this is really a time where we can think about new exciting opportunities for experiments under microgravity. And not only, of course, for space research, but really to try to use space to build innovative commercial product for the terrestrial market. And of course, we, as it was mentioned by Emmanuel, we really think that biomanufacturing is really a good target to try to build new experiments that can benefit from space. Biomanufacturing is a key area in biotech, pharma, medtech, and cosmetic markets. And you will see in the next presentation some examples on how microgravity and the space environment can be used in this field. And finally, I just want to introduce again the Bsgn Life Sciences Industry Accelerator. So we are coordinating in cooperation with France Biotech the Bsgn Life Science Industry Accelerator, which means that we are currently trying to put together the first portfolio of projects, of industrial projects, using this new space offers. And this can benefit both to project providers, but maybe also to potentially interesting investors. We are the main contact point and the central point to connect all stakeholders to do that and to help both project providers or anyone interested in that field to help you to define potential strategies and to understand how space can benefit to your activity. And again, we are really at a time where the new space offers are completely changing the trend, the possibilities, and this program and we and our partners are there to try to help you to use these possibilities. Again, we have this strong expertise between space and health, and we can be your main contact points to try to identify how to use this, how to exploit these new opportunities.
Thank you very much, Audrey, for this presentation. I think the message is clear. Correct, if you want to do something in space. Now, Cynthia, I leave you the floor to introduce your presentation.
Thank you. Thanks. And I could not agree with Audrey more. And hearing what Emmanuel first talked about in terms of the French strategy around biomedicine production, and then to hear Lisa talk about really the vision that ESA is having on the commercialization of space is a great setting for how Audrey just described. We're now at the forefront of so much opportunity, and with the advent of new industrial applications, now really is the time to exploit this great opportunity. I think the other thing that Audrey just talked about is, there's always this connection between, why space and what does that have to do with my terrestrial operations in biomanufacturing or in life sciences or in cosmetic production. And what we're going to try to do right now is give you that connection, that translation between why space, the way that Lisa just described it, which was amazing, and what is that terrestrial use for you? Not focused on astronauts, not focused on exploration, but focused on your own biomanufacturing production here on the ground. So if you can go to the next slide, Jonathan. When we talk about the International Space Station and we talk about the work that you can do in low Earth orbit, we're talking about new science and innovation. The use cases and the case studies that we're about to present are about higher quality research and development, and now manufacturing. The International Space Station was never built originally for manufacturing processes. But now what we're seeing, and we're going to hear from Rich Bowling of TechShot, we've got many new capabilities that are focused on moving towards manufacturing in space. And why would you do that? Because of the higher quality product that you can achieve. There's new commercial opportunity, and what we just heard, and I think Lisa really is doing an excellent job on this Business and Space Growth Network and really creating this commercial opportunity for people and companies and organizations that would never have thought space is relevant for them. And they're now understanding how it's relevant, and they're now having access to that space. And then there's also the marketing and branding opportunities and the ability to capitalize on PR opportunities. If you go to the next slide. There's already extensive commercial and scientific activity happening in low Earth orbit. And if you look at just these company logos, this is just a small sliver of the types of organizations that are doing work in space for the benefit of their own operations terrestrially. And they're doing it across all of those areas. Today, we're really specifically talking about life science and biomanufacturing. But you can see there's a whole range of other markets and verticals that are relevant for space-based activities. And on Lisa's slide, you saw sustainability, the UN, what am I trying to say? The sustainability goals and the European Green Deal. There's so much you can do from a sustainability standpoint in space and bringing those solutions back to Earth. Next slide, please. Lisa covered this a little bit, and what we're going to be talking about now are what are the science phenomena that underpin why you would do something in space. And what we always say is, if you could do something here on the ground and achieve the same results, you should actually do it here on the ground. And the reason you do something in space is because of one of these three phenomena: the microgravity, which we'll talk about in the use cases, the extreme conditions, going outside and you're having heat and cold cycling, you're having atomic oxygen, you're having debris impact. And what takes decades to degrade on the ground may take weeks or months in space. So it's an excellent platform for material testing. And then the vantage point, the unique vantage point to do remote sensing and Earth observation type activity. If you go to the next slide, that science phenomena relates to these types of applications. So in life sciences, we're talking about protein crystal growth. We're talking about drug development and discovery, cellular biology, microorganisms, accelerated disease models, manufacturing and process optimization, and then agriculture and crop science. And then you can see across these other areas in physical sciences, separations, interfacial studies, biofilms. In the manufacturing areas, there's a number of ways to manufacture utilizing microgravity for superior products. So mixing and emulsifying. In the life science area, the lyopolization, the polymerization, the deposition, the spraying and the coating. And then we talked about the remote sensing. So I'm now going to turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Volk and Dr. Molly Mulligan to take us through using that science phenomena and using those application areas. Let's hear about some relevant use cases and explaining why you would actually do this stuff in low Earth orbit.
Thank you, Cindy. So thinking about these applications that Cindy introduced us to, why would we use microgravity to do drug discovery and development? Well, for any of these types of drug discovery and development, macromolecular crystallization with proteins, new target identification, new formulations, or biomarker discovery, we're really looking at the fact that microgravity allows proteins and other macromolecules to grow larger and nearly defect-free crystals due to the lack of convection and sedimentation in the microgravity environment. And that can allow us to find a new shape for our crystal. It can allow us to form crystals and actually see the structure of the crystals that we can't on the ground. So if we go to the next slide, Jonathan. In looking at cell biology, cells in our body form 3D structures very easily without thinking about it, if you will. And we find that that happens also in microgravity, which allows, so we don't need a scaffolding or any kind of matrix to support the cells, which allows us to really look at regenerative medicine for the creation of stem cell therapies, whether that's for treating rare diseases or cancers. It could allow us to grow organs and tissues for transplant and disease treatment. And it could allow us to grow microorgans for things like drug efficacy and safety testing. Stem cells, which I'll talk quite a bit about in a little while, really in microgravity, we can understand changes in stem cell behavior, things like enhanced stemness and changes in gene expression, and tissue chips, which are coming into their own on the ground, can be used to study things like organ-organ interactions, immune dysfunction, drug efficacy and safety in multi-organ systems, and looking at the growth and movement of things like cancer tumors and treatments for those. So if we go to the next slide, Jonathan, thank you. Again, cell biology, as we think about the future and creating organs to transplant, we have a 3D bioprinter on the International Space Station, and that's thanks to TechShot. And by going to space, we can print larger tissue samples without the tissue collapsing. We can print the tissues without a scaffolding or matrix, and we can use a variety of bio-ink fluid viscosities we don't need fillers or thickeners, so we can print things anywhere from water to peanut butter. And we can also do a lot of microbial studies, whether that's looking at biofilms formation, biofilm treatment, antibiotic resistance in biofilms, and changes in bacterial virulence. And Jonathan, if you want to go to the next slide. Thanks. Another thing, as Lisa touched on, we can do we have accelerated disease models in space. We know that when astronauts unload their bones and muscles, they have bone and muscle wasting. And we see that too, whether using animal models or cellular models to study these things. We also have aging-related diseases related to bone and muscle loss and cellular senescence. So we can understand how age-related diseases progress at an accelerated manner, and then immune dysfunction. In microgravity, we see that again in the astronauts and in immune cells, so we can study changes in immune cell function. Jonathan, the next slide, please. Another thing that we talked about is manufacturing and process optimization. So there's a lot of research that goes on currently in low Earth orbit. And as we look to the future, we look to ways to manufacture things in space because of that superior product. Whether it's lyopolization, the process of freeze drying, and how that's affected by microgravity because things won't sediment out by size, whether it's production of monoclonal antibodies in microgravity, production of vaccine or secondary metabolites for use in pharmaceuticals, nutritions, and cosmetic products. Using microgravity as our manufacturing platform, we can create some superior products and optimize the process of the creation of those products. Next slide, Jonathan. And also, very interestingly, we can do a lot with medical devices in microgravity. Medical device implants such as multi-layered materials using electrodeposition, self-assembled medical device implants like stents have been studied in microgravity. Diagnostics optimization, again, we have this lack of sedimentation and convection in microgravity, so we can really understand how diagnostic tools performance changes in this kind of environment. And we can find new biomarkers to create better diagnostic tools. And then nanotechnology, using nanoparticles for whether it's directed self-assembly or actually directing treatments to a disease. That lack of convection and sedimentation really helps us understand the transport of those nanoparticles. And Jonathan, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jonathan Volk.
Great, thanks. So the last couple use cases here, we look at packaging. So obviously, whether it's the material itself or the contents of the package, we've looked at potential sustainable packaging. So how can you make novel packaging materials that could be more eco-friendly? Obviously, alternative to plastics. That's obviously a big problem now here on Earth. So formulating, looking at taking microgravity to formulate materials on a molecular level that have fewer defects, and then that can hence be innovative solutions to what's currently offered in packaging materials. Also looking at if you have a dispenser like a cosmetic or something like that, how do you optimize the flow profile out of the dispenser? That's obviously a key thing, and with surface forces dominant in microgravity, those things can be isolated to develop a better dispenser. And then if you do have a packaging material, how does it degrade in an extreme environment? We talked about those conditions, but it can be done obviously much faster than it can be done on the ground to really get quick feedback on failure modes. And now turning away from the microgravity aspect, looking at raw material identification, using that vantage point of Leo to identify locations across the globe, utilizing remote sensing techniques where these maybe unique materials could be located, whether it's a mineral or a unique oil, etc. And then that can also be concentrated on a specific geographic area to find these unique materials or additional sources of them that could be used in biomanufacturing, and also getting more data about the planet that could help produce these raw materials on the ground based on soil characteristics, climate, etc. So our last set here is we're going to go on specific case studies. These are actual projects that flew to space and really took advantage of the ISS or the microgravity environment in general to make impacts on the ground. So I'll go back to Molly to talk about these initial examples.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. So crystallization, we talked about how we could crystallize drugs in a microgravity environment without sedimentation and convection. Merck Pharmaceuticals used this to create a new formulation of their blockbuster drug Keytruda. And what they did here is they looked at how the development of, or how the growth of these crystals in space can lead to a new way for delivering the drug. Currently, Merck's monoclonal antibody Keytruda is a very large molecule, and it has to be given intravenously over the course of several hours in a hospital setting. But by going to space, Merck was able to create a smaller crystal, and so create a new formulation that could be a highly concentrated crystal in suspension. And both it not only improves the formulation and the delivery possibilities, but also the storage and purification process. And what the value of this really is that we could have more targeted medications with fewer side effects, because we can have smaller doses, and we could also have new ways to administer the drugs rather than having to use administer drugs intravenously in a mainline port. We could use something like an insulin pump on the arm or the stomach to deliver drugs more effectively and put patients at less risk for side effects in the future by going into that hospital setting. The next slide, Jonathan. The National Cancer Institute here in the United States performed a lot of research around cell culture. They were looking not only at the creation of microorgans or organoids, but also the creation of cancer tumors, and using all of these microorgans and cancer tumors for model systems for drug efficacy testing, looking at the long-term age-related diseases and even wound healing. And as I said before, cells in the microgravity environment tend to form 3D structures without the use of a scaffolding or matrix, and they tend to behave and communicate more like cells in the human body do. And what this helps us do is better understand the formation of things like cancer tumors, organoids, and even how wounds heal, which can lead to better treatments and decreased time to market for medication, and also, most importantly, early indications of medication failure, saving money in the long run for the creation of life-saving medications. Next slide. Stem cells behave really interesting in space. Loma Linda University, so you can see we have a variety of commercial companies and university researchers doing work in space. We use microgravity to gain insight into stem cell function and biology, especially in relation to cardiac tissue maintenance, repair, and function. But using microgravity, we can understand things like stem cell migration, stem cell proliferation, stem cell differentiation, and even stem cell signaling. And what we find in space is that stem cells tend to retain their stemness for longer in the microgravity environment. And this is important because it helps us understand stem cell functionality and will allow us to be able to produce new and novel organs or microorgans for transplant. Next slide, Jonathan. Thank you. And as I said, we have a 3D bioprinter on the International Space Station, and it's done several different prints at this point, and we'll continue to print pieces of tissue. And so far, we had a meniscus that was printed, and the meniscus is, I think many of us know, acts as that shock absorber in our knee, and it can tear when we're doing physical activity, and that can help us lose that cushioning effect on the knees. So what microgravity really allows us to do, and why we want a 3D bioprint in microgravity, because we can print larger tissues than those that can be printed terrestrially, because the tissues don't collapse on themselves as they're being printed, and don't require strengthening in order to prevent that collapse. So instead, we can print larger tissues and strengthen them after printing. And this leads us to more successful reconstruction of the knee in the case of a meniscus, and eventually it can lead to types of tissues for transplant, reducing the need for animal tissue organs and reducing the risk of tissue rejection, because we could do it with a patient's own cells. Next slide.
Okay, so just two quick last examples. Molly mentioned lyopolization. So Eli Lilly did a number of projects, but one was focused on lyopolization. They wanted to see how that freeze drying process was different in microgravity. Could they get a more stable product? And could that potentially be used as a ramp to actually manufacturing or freeze drying products in space? Because the benefit there could be you could make a pharmaceutical that could last longer. And if you're trying to get a drug to a remote area, deliver it to underserved areas, it may be easier to do that with the longer lasting pharmaceuticals. There could be earth-based benefits there. So that's obviously a big positive. And lastly, we're going to hear from the CSO of Lambda Vision and he's going to talk about what they did utilizing microgravity to manufacture retinal implants. But the key thing here is this could be an actual manufacturing model to make retinal implants using electrodeposition that can be made. These implants can be made more optimally in microgravity and really make an impact, improving the healing people from serious eye diseases. So Jordan will talk about that a little bit more in the panel. So that's our last example. Now we'll turn it back to Marie-Laure to introduce the panel, I believe.
So thank you very much to you all, guys. Thank you for this exhaustive presentation. And as we said at the very beginning, and as Audrey said, if you want to engage, maybe you can go to the next slide. Thank you very much. Feel free to get in touch with us, to reach us. You have the email address. If you have any idea, any projects, or even if you are not sure but interested in the subject, in the topics, we can discuss. We can organize some kind of workshops in your facilities or anything. So please get in touch with us if you want to discuss about these topics. So thank you. Now I think it's time for the panel discussion. So Cynthia, once again, it's your turn.
Thank you. And so I think Rich and Jordan will come on, and Chloe and Audrey. Great. So what we'd like to spend the remainder of the time doing is really talk about the practitioners, those folks that have been operating in low Earth orbit. We're coming at it from an organization, Lambda Vision, that was never thinking about space and now is really doing quite a bit in terms of manufacturing their retinal implants using low Earth orbit. And we've heard a bit about Rich Bowling and TechShot and the work that they're doing, really creating the infrastructure around manufacturing in space. It will be great also to hear from Chloe Evans, practitioner from the biomanufacturing side terrestrially, and Audrey to continue on in terms of comments related to how METIS sees this evolution and this industrial capability growth and applications in low Earth orbit. So we're going to start right now. I'm going to ask Jordan and Rich to sort of give a quick little introduction into their organization. And Jordan, in particular, if you could talk about, what led you to low Earth orbit, coming from being a startup focused on retinal implants.
Sure, Cynthia, and thanks very much for having me today. I'll try to keep it brief because I think it could be a long story if I'm not too careful. But so just a quick introduction. I'm Jordan Greco, Chief Scientific Officer of Lambda Vision. Lambda Vision is developing an artificial retinal implant to treat patients that are blinded by retinal degenerative diseases, including the rare disease retinitis pigmentosa, and also age-related macular degeneration, which is the leading cause of blindness for people above the age of 55 years old. We were a startup that emerged out of the University of Connecticut in the Department of Chemistry. Our founder is Dr. Robert Burge, who was a distinguished professor of chemistry, and I was a graduate student in his lab at the time. I'm a physical chemist by training. I received my PhD through my research group with Dr. Burge. My focus at the time was studying these light-activated proteins, particularly bacteriorhodopsin, for just looking at the physical properties of the protein and also applying that protein into different bioelectronic devices, including optical memories, photovoltaic, solar cells, and ultimately the artificial retina that we're talking about today. And a lot of the focus of my graduate work was on the layer-by-layer assembly of bacteriorhodopsin for these artificial retinas. And that's the process that we use, is layer-by-layer electrostatic deposition to create our films. So just really quickly to introduce the concept, the artificial retina architecture is really quite simple. It's an ion-permeable scaffold, and then we deposit alternating layers of the protein and then a polymer binder in between each layer of protein. And we repeat that hundreds of times to ultimately create artificial retina. And then we punch and package and use the implants for various experiments and future studies. One of our major needs, of course, is a film that's highly stable, uniform across the surface area, and something that's efficacious and we can rely on for our non-clinical work and clinical work. And we've had some success with what we've been doing in a terrestrial environment. But always, sought to improve upon the nature of the layer-by-layer films. And like Cynthia mentioned, I mean, we weren't really focused on the thought of microgravity at first. We were founded in 2009 and had several years of development before that. our research group did have some experience, believe it or not, on the space shuttle missions back in the 90s, where we're looking at the assembly of the protein in different matrix altogether. So this concept always kind of lingered in the back of our minds, I suppose. But it wasn't until we met Cynthia, and we were a part of Mass Challenge in 2016, where we were introduced to the idea of utilizing microgravity to improve upon our artificial retina manufacturing. We won the Cases Boeing Prize in 2016 at Mass Challenge, and it kind of snowballed from there. You know, we were introduced to our current implementation partner, Space Tango, did some proof of concept work on the space station, you know, worked with NASA and the space station, and were awarded a number of funds through their SBIR program and their NRA commercialization awards, which I could talk more about. And yeah, now we're just really focused on optimization, looking ahead to scale and regulatory requirements, which again, I could speak to. And apologies for a long introduction there.
No, that was great. And I think we will come back to the regulatory bit, because we saw some questions on that on the chat earlier. So Rich Bowling, who is the vice president of TechShot, which is now a Redwire company, can give us maybe the other angle, coming at it from being a space manufacturing platform company.
Yeah, thanks. So TechShot and its larger now parent company, Redwire, both are space infrastructure companies. And our portion here was founded in the 1980s. And we've been providing what sometimes I call the picks and shovels, the tools that folks like Jordan and others are using to make these new discoveries in microgravity. And over the past 30 some odd years, we've developed probably the largest catalog of life science research equipment by any country or company for operation inside the space station. And so everything from centrifuges to the bioprinter you've heard about, to just multi-purpose hardware that is all on board the ISS today and available. And our customers all are from space agencies, from academia, and increasingly from commercial companies. And so we're eager to meet new people in Europe who may like to have a new front door to space. And all of our agreements with NASA and with the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space permit us to serve as that front door for companies anywhere in the world. So I'm excited to be included today, and really honored to be among these panelists. Thank you.
Great. And I'm wondering, Chloe or Audrey, do you guys have any sort of observations? You know, Audrey, you mentioned the industrial applications and building these tools. Both Rich and Jordan are practitioners with these tools and creating these new manufacturing systems. Or Chloe, I don't know, from the membership side of the biomanufacturing community, do you think this is something that is interesting to this community? And do we want to maybe hear more about what led each of these organizations down the path of space-based activities?
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Well, I think there's clearly a strong interest, I think, from biotech companies, you know, both French and European, to look at different methods for producing, whether, you know, it's antibodies, biologics. What we've basically noticed among our members is that more and more companies are adopting innovative therapies. They're developing small molecules, but also more and more biologics, antibodies, gene therapy, cell therapy. You know, there's a lot of research going on into how to produce these types of products, very innovative. So it could be very, I think, interesting from an applied research perspective for private players to look at what's, you know, available. What kind of experiments are available, what's possible, whether it's, you know, in optimization of production and processes, whether it's looking at different ways for the proof of concept. I think there's quite a of things available. And really the idea of participating to this project is to try and bring terrestrial research and space research closer together. I think that's really one of the objectives. We've seen that there's more and more porosity between these two worlds. And I think from a biotech company perspective, I think some are aware that microgravity has effects on cellular biology, for example, but I think most of biotech companies are unaware of actually private players conducting experiments on the ISS. So I think it's very interesting to educate, to basically show what's possible, and to have this program in order to select projects that could be interesting. So yeah, so I think it's a very interesting initiative. Very happy to be part of it. And yeah, lots of opportunities and lots of, we see the trend, in the dynamics in terms of the dynamics of biotherapies on the from an economical point of view, from a patient point of view. So it'd be very interesting to basically encourage that and use microgravity as a real environment to develop new therapies.
Great. And Audrey, I don't know if you have a comment or.
Well, I just want to highlight again that in the past, most of the experiments, at least at European level, that we were doing were really scientifically driven. So it was scientific research, mainly academic scientific research, and the time to fly was really high, sometimes many years. This is completely changing, and Richard mentioned it, and Jordan as well. Also Lisa, I think with the new offers, we do not only have very advanced facilities, automated, and Richard was mentioning that for 3D bioprinting, but also for other research. But really, we have advanced services that may be now compliant with the timeline of the companies, which was not the case in the past. And this is really changing.
I think that's an excellent segue back to both Rich and to Jordan. Rich, if there's some biomanufacturing or life science organizations out in the audience or going to listen to this in the follow-up, and they know nothing, and I know Marie-Laure put us, they want to be contacted. How does somebody go about doing this? If I know nothing about space, what does that feel like to the end user as you're working with those types of new to space organizations?
This is actually how most of our business is conducted, this model of working with people who have never done this before. More and more people seem to be suddenly discovering what those of us here today have known for a long time, that a commercial company can do something privately in space. And so we are very adept, I suppose, at having that conversation starting from zero. And I typically like to bring in our science staff. We have a great engineering staff and a science staff. We all come together in a meeting, in a conversation with someone who is a first-time flyer, someone who's considering space research for the first time. And there are no silly questions. All questions are good, and we just begin to describe what is available to the customer and really begin with the end in mind. At the end of the day, how do you want your samples processed? What are you trying to achieve terrestrially? Some of our customers only need to go to space maybe even one time. They've learned something very important from one space flight, and then they take that and what they've learned in space and microgravity and change some terrestrial biological manufacturing process, even from just one flight. So that's really the process for us, Cindy, is we come around a virtual table these days and just listen and react to what the customer wants.
And maybe a similar question to you, Jordan. When you did talk about sort of your lead up to doing this work, and for you, it wasn't a one-shot deal. You sort of built upon all of these projects in space, and now really producing a manufacturing model for ongoing activity. how difficult was it for you to convince, you know, sort of the business side of your organization? You're the chief scientific officer, and I'm sure you wear many hats in a startup type of environment. But how hard was it for you to convince sort of the business folks that yes, this is a sound way to go, and this is the direction our company should be taking?
Yeah, I think really we just have to let the data speak for itself. You know, if we really are showing improvement in microgravity versus what we're doing on a terrestrial environment, and we can show, you know, obviously there's economic questions around that too, and you know, I think the timeline aspect was touched on a few different times too, and I certainly don't view that as a barrier at this stage for sure. I mean, we have a steady cadence of flights, you know, every 6 months or so. I think Lisa was speaking, you know, you can certainly execute a flight within 6 months, if not, you know, if you have some foresight, there's more and more of a cadence these days than ever. So it's really just, you know, for us, you know, I think our board was probably skeptical at first when they heard this idea and what we were trying to do. But, you know, I think ultimately the more and more data that we get back, I think the more and more convincing we can make that story and show that there really is that benefit to the physical product. And I think that will ultimately, you know, lead to us, you know, we're obviously going to need to have the same conversations with the regulatory agencies and so on. But again, I think we just need to let that data speak for itself and show that there is this significant improvement, and that's kind of where we are now, optimizing the experiments and the throughput to show and the comparison between the films made on the space station and on Earth.
And Jordan, why don't you just say a little bit more about the regulatory point, because there was a question earlier about that. You know, what is your approach? And I'm sure everyone that has to deal with the regulatory environment here on the ground is thinking, what does going to space add to, you know, the work I have to do with clinical trials or ultimate FDA regulatory approval? What are the types of things that you're doing in that area now?
Yeah, it's a great question. I mean, and we're still at the beginning stages of this, I would say, but it's, you know, before the microgravity work, LAM division met separately with the FDA. Of course, I'm going to be talking about in the American context here, of course, but we met with the FDA and I guess concurrently with some of the work, but in 2019, we met with them for a pre-investigational new drug meeting. And, you know, talked to them. We had a data package of our preclinical work and some of our thoughts around, you know, the manufacturing process, both involving our protein and layer by layer, and also what we expect out of our non-clinical work and leading up to the clinical trials. You know, so we had, you know, some buy-in and a framework for what our plans were, not really involving the microgravity work per se, because we, you know, are still sort of in the proof of concept stages at that point. But now with Space Tango and with the NRA, the NASA NRA research award that we received for commercialization, we're really focused on, you know, developing a roadmap for what it means to produce a product with clinical benefit in space. You know, we, alongside Space Tango, our implementation partner, we're working with a couple of regulatory consultants and manufacturing consultants to put the right framework in place. And this requires, you know, we're looking ahead towards integrating clean rooms, and, you know, we haven't really gone into the structure of what the experiments look like and what the cube lab looks like, but, you know, this is really a closed system for us, and this might not be true for every experiment, but, you know, once we seal up that cube, it's not going to be opened up on the space station. So our intent is to kind of do a lot of the processes that are required for GMP on the ground, send it up to the space station, let the processes, you know, perform, and then take it back down and work within a clean room again. So there's some you know, elements of that nature that we're planning for, and you know, ultimately we're going to have to create this data package to present to the FDA, as I mentioned, and present a strong case and let it be data driven.
Great. And, you know, you just mentioned something that I'm seeing Lisa in her in the chat put a link back into use cases and funding opportunities. And I think Audrey and Chloe, the work you're doing with Lisa, with the Bsgn, with this Accelerator, with the opportunities that Lisa talked about with CASE and other ways of generating funding, I think is an incredible opportunity for those that are listening here, because I think, Rich and Jordan, as you can attest, as you do the space-based activity, having some sort of additional funding from space agencies or government entities or other types of things to help bridge this activity is really crucial. And the fact that Audrey and Chloe, that we're at this point in time now where these opportunities exist, I think is presenting a great again, to overuse the word, a great opportunity for these organizations to be working with you. So Audrey or Chloe, I don't know if you have anything to add there.
Well, maybe if Chloe doesn't stop. Yes, indeed. I think we have this chance to have Lisa and the team of the European Space Agency with us to build this first portfolio of projects, which means that this is also a possibility of co-funding for this first project. So in fact, you do not take a lot of risk, and we are trying all together to build these industrial projects. And Lisa may possibly complete, but yes, it's very important to highlight indeed that there is a possibility for co-funding from the European Space Agency.
Great, and I think I know Marie-Laure put in the chat, do not hesitate to ask your questions in the chat. So please do if you have any. As we're running out of time here, one of the things that we always hear about space-based activity is, the first thing is, there's so many partnerships across disciplines that happen naturally. And out of that comes really great innovation. The other is, you always seem to achieve benefits that you never thought of as you were going into it. So I would just like to ask Jordan or Rich, do you guys have examples of these benefits, these unexpected benefits of doing work in space, or these types of partnerships that happen across disciplines that really did lead to new innovation? Just to lead with an exciting ending to this session today.
Well, Cindy, I have, I think, an example, and Molly mentioned it earlier in regards to what Merck was doing with developing crystalline forms of drugs and improving delivery methods for Keytruda. Our chief scientist emeritus had been conducting research in space, even beginning back in a small way in the Apollo program in the early 1970s, and then throughout the early shuttle period. And his lab notebook contained observances of the uniformity of protein crystals being manufactured in some rudimentary experiments. And over his journal entries discussed crystals that maybe were smaller but very, very uniform. And for years the emphasis had been really on large crystals for X-ray diffraction purposes. But TechShot is now developing something it calls the Pharmaceutical In-Space Laboratory, or the PIL, really as a way to manufacture small but very uniform crystals for companies like Merck or Eli Lilly here in the US. And it was an unintended consequence of really aiming for another target, but coming up with a new technique that perhaps was years ahead of its time and now is very valuable to industry.
Great. Jordan, quickly, because we have a question to answer.
Yes, of course. Cindy, please, if you want to read it, or
sure. What about transposing biomanufacturing microgravity experiments back to gravity conditions on Earth? do you already have experiences with that tissue?
You talking about with like our bioprinter, the 3D bioprinter, for example?
Or like what happens when you're, with bringing it back?
So we've conducted a few experiments beyond the meniscus print that we did. We did some printing of cardiac structures and multi-layer cardiac structures, and the bioprinting worked well, but we learned that it takes more than a few days to condition those printed structures to survive re-entry into gravity and survive before it's back into our laboratory on Earth and having been removed from a capsule floating in the ocean. So I will say that our early tests were very helpful and instructive to know that we need to culture and condition what we bioprint for much longer than we initially thought, a period of weeks versus a period of days. But the more chances we get to iterate these experiments, the more we'll learn about what is the right amount of time to condition those tissues. It's all a learning process.
Great, and we are at time, Marie-Laure, so I don't know if we're good with this panel. I wish we had another hour to go through these discussions. It was so incredible, but back over to you, Marie-Laure.
I think so, and I understand what is your feeling. Maybe we have a few minutes for a very last question, if you want to conclude this webinar, Cynthia. And after, of course, we are going to say goodbye to all our attendees. So
there is one new question, Marie-Laure. Do you see it?
Oh yes. Thank you very much, Audrey. So typically you get data and samples back for analysis and you can use the results.
Yeah, the previous question is what about protein and any structure modification?
Thank you. It's going too fast.
I think Jordan can answer that one.
Yeah, I could speak to this. So again, kind of leading back to the idea of if there's any modifications after coming back to Earth and spending time on the ISS. That's something else that we've been focused on as a group. We're primarily looking at layer by layer manufacturing, but we've done some experiments to just sort of incubate the protein up on the space station and kind of do some before and after measurements to look at the function and stability of our protein. And I guess that's really all I can speak to is our protein. And so far, we haven't seen any negative effect on both the structure and the function. I should mention the protein that we're working with is not a soluble protein. It's a transmembrane protein, and we don't isolate monomers of that protein. We work with membrane fragments. So there's thousands of protein monomers within a membrane fragment. So one of our concerns was, even beyond the protein, if those membrane fragments may remain viable. During ascent, during it's the sample's time on the space station, and then descent, and the same thing goes for the film. So so far we haven't seen any deleterious effects on the biomaterials, but that's something we're still looking at and alongside the layering experiments that we're doing.
Thank you very much for your answer. I think we are going to stop. I would like to warmly thank all our speakers. Thank you very much for your attending, and of course, thank you for all the attending people in the webinar. I'm pretty sure that we are going to be able to share our presentations if needed. So do not hesitate to get back in contact with us. And yes, it was really a pleasure to have you with you. So now it's time to say goodbye. Have a nice day. Bye.
And maybe as a conclusion, bye-bye everybody, as a conclusion, so you have this tool, the Bsgn Industry Accelerator for Life Sciences, not only for French partners or company, really at European level, so do not hesitate to contact us if you have any idea or question. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye, guys.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.